The other one is I think you just need to pay more, pay a little bit better. That'd be nice.
I mean, like you said, when you start calculating your hourly rate, it's disturbing how low it can be.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to Blood, Sweat, and Balance Sheets. This is Mike Whitmire, co-founder, CEO of FloQast, and also a proudly inactive CPA. Very excited for today's guest. Today on the line, we have Katie Thomas, also a CPA. We're going to chat about the industry and some mental health issues as well. So welcome aboard, Katie. Thanks for joining.
Hey, Mike. Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, me too. I think this is a really important topic for accounting and everything that's going on. But, before we head into any of that, I wanted to just get to know you a little bit. Can you tell us more about your background, where you live? I'd love to understand how you got into accounting and what you're up to today.
Yeah, of course. So I live in the wonderful Kansas City. Super exciting. No, I like it here. It's a good place to raise a family, good, wholesome people. But my story actually, I would say, starts out from the time I was little. I was like, I'm going to be an entrepreneur. I'm going to be a business owner. So I had all these businesses growing up, and I was literally helping pick my neighbor's weeds. That was one of my first businesses. And one time I was selling candy on the school bus. So I've always just had this idea that you can always make money. And when I was 16, I got my first real job. It was making cold calls. And then I got shifted into a marketing role. And I loved marketing because of the whole communications piece of it and how you can really tell a story and influence people in a greater way than I felt like sales. So I really like the marketing aspect, and I did enjoy sales, but marketing really piqued my interest. But when I went to school, people say, oh, well, if you're good at math, then you should look at accounting. And so that's how I got started down the accounting route. I didn't necessarily want to be an accountant per se, but the skills came really naturally to me, and people said, oh, it's the language of business. And so before you knew it, I was getting my CPA. And once I took the exam, of course, you have to then go get a certain set years of experience working in the actual accounting field. And so I found myself in public accounting. And while I was there, one of the first things I noticed was, oh my gosh, I cannot imagine staying here and becoming partner and living that lifestyle. Like, it already is not attractive as a staff, but I cannot fathom being a partner. And that's nothing to say, like, I totally respect the partners that do that work. That's a very hard job, but I just could not picture myself actually living that life for that long. And so anyway, while I was at Ernst Young, I realized that a lot of the skill sets I learned doing marketing, because I did it for quite a few years, even all throughout college, I realized that a lot of those skills could be applied to the accounting industry. And I saw a huge opportunity. I was like, wow, if at Ernst Young, I'm seeing opportunity, I cannot imagine the opportunity that is available with some of these smaller firms that aren't big four.
What do you mean by opportunity for EY?
So one of the things I heard from the managers and senior managers that I worked with, they would say one of the biggest roadblocks to moving up is that they were nervous about building their book of business. They didn't feel like they had the tools and the resources and that pressure that came along with it. So I'm not sure, I was not a manager and I was not a senior manager. So I'm not sure exactly what they were provided, but that was a common discussion that I would hear about, is just them being nervous about this new level of responsibility and pressure.
And I think that's, no, sorry to cut you off a little bit, but I think that's a common misconception or maybe misunderstanding and it was even for me, when I got into audit, I didn't realize that to become partner, I had to effectively become a salesperson at, I don't know, after 5 or 6 years or so and start to build up a book of business to prove my ability to become partner. Did you start in audit knowing that was how the path evolved?
No. And I did an audit internship with PwC, and then I did go into tax, but okay. It's the same thing.
Same deal. Yeah.
Yeah. No, you're not taught any of these skills, and you especially going to school, you're not exposed to them at all, that you're going to have to be, like you said, a salesperson. You're going to have to know how to market yourself. And
sales isn't even a major in college.
Right. So there's this huge gap right there. Okay. So I got the idea of, okay, well, I know that accounting isn't for me long term. And there was a series of events that kind of pushed me to the final ledge. But along the way, I was like, well, what if I just tried this? What if I took what I know and I apply it to accounting firms where I have a good understanding of what they do, the problem they solve. And I know that accountants, if we're going to put them all into a bucket, they're very smart people. And I had an idea that they'd appreciate that I could understand already speaking their language, kind of writing in their voice, communicating their thoughts. And so I tried it, and it was needed. It was awesome. I was solving a big problem. And so now today we work with firms all over the US, variety of sizes. Some are smaller, some are larger in the top 100. But our whole premise is creating thought leadership content so that they can increase their impact, influence, and income.
And so you said how many people do you have on the team?
So we have 2 content writers, a web designer, someone that does SEO, and we have a handful of virtual assistants that help manage all the social media platforms.
Awesome. And so in what, what capacity would I look to hire your firm? Is it, you had mentioned you kind of run the gamut of small up to large. So what do the engagements look like?
Yeah. So at the highest level, we can be your outsourced CMO and help manage your marketing efforts at a high level and give you strategy and guidance. And you might have other people actually implementing them. Or what a lot of firms have us do is actually take that strategy and implement it. So maybe we're starting fresh and we're redesigning your website. Then we're doing ongoing SEO, creating your content for your website, running Google Ads. We also manage a lot of social media platforms, create content on there, and then do public relations. So let's actually create some content on your behalf and get it published. Like if you're wanting to get more features, even just in the accounting industry, or maybe you want to be featured as the law firm expert, and we can go to different outlets that have legal authority and we get you published there. So it just kind of depends on the firm and their goals. And that's why we like to start with that overarching strategy so we can get in alignment on what those are.
Okay. And then, there's, you say law firms, right? So there are a lot of verticals within accounting. So you need to figure out what's the strategy for, hey, how do we hit on these firms that would be most applicable for my client? And sounds like it's a little bit different and creative across the board then.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. Very cool. Very cool. All right. I want to go back way to the beginning when you decided you like to make money. Was there anything that put you on that path? Was there like, you wanted to go buy something fun when you were a kid and you figured out some way to make some money? Or is it just you like making money? How did that all start?
Okay, the first thing I can remember is my older sister, who I really looked up to. She got this basically a sales pitch at school to help, like you could sell cookie dough and get these cool little trinkets. And she was like, "Hey, look what I could earn, but the deadline's tomorrow and I haven't sold any cookie dough." And so I asked my parents for our phone book at the time. And I started just calling people. I was in first grade. They probably couldn't even understand me, and selling cookie dough to them because I was like, let's earn. I don't even remember what the trinkets were exactly. Like, I think, well, one was
wrapping papers.
Yeah, like it was just like actually junk, but I thought it looked really cool in the magazine. And so we sold so much cookie dough that I remember my mom had to bring our minivan and we totally loaded it out with cookie dough to go deliver. So I was like, wow, this is awesome. You can get people to exchange money whenever you have something to offer them.
Okay. Wow. You were slamming phones in first grade. That's very impressive. I have never heard of anyone cold calling that early.
I guess I just wasn't scared of it.
Yeah, no, everyone has fear of that entire exercise. So that's cool. Fearless entrepreneur at 6.
Gotta sell the cookie dough.
Yeah. So and it's amazing how a little goal like that, you figure out how to make it work, and then it can kind of like I don't want to say set you on a path for your rest of your life, but it definitely introduced you to entrepreneurship and help get you to where you are today.
Totally. And then from there, it was like, hey, well, what else can I do to earn money? And I guess the cookie dough didn't actually help me earn money, but it just showed me that, people will exchange, money for something that they want. So
what was your favorite hustle along the way until you got to you started your current firm?
My favorite one was I was a big horseback rider, and I still ride horses today. And so I started training other people's horses. And if you help them sell the horse, then you would get commission on the sale. And
Oh,
so if you could help them negotiate a higher rate for selling the horse and did a good job training it, then you could make more money. And I really liked that because it helped the buyer and the seller, because you could be a really good advocate in between of like making sure the horse got to the right person at the end of the day, and it was a good fit. So I loved that one. And honestly, it just proved that if there's a problem that you can help solve, you can always make money.
yeah. And that's very cool. You were in a space where you love the animals and it sounds like it was a hobby and you got to make money off of it. That's very cool. That's
Yeah,
sort of everyone's dream. Right.
exactly. Awesome.
So on that note, that kind of leads into one of the things that we want to chat about, which is accounting. Not everyone loves it. It can be tough and a grind. And we've been talking a lot about mental health and burnout. And FloQast just put out a study about how much burnout there really is in accounting and controllership in particular. So we'd just love to get your thoughts on this world and how you feel about everything and what your take is for dealing with some of that stuff.
Yeah. So I shared a little bit that whenever I was working in public accounting, I would see the partners and just be like, I don't see how you do it day in and day out. And it's a real problem. I remember the week I got married, I was taking off on a Thursday, and I was going to take off on a Thursday and have the following week off. And so they're like, no problem, but we just got to get this, and this done. And for the Sunday, the Monday, the Tuesday, and the Wednesday night leading up to me leaving, I got between 2 and 2.5 hours of sleep each night.
Oh,
And I just remember that feeling of like, okay, so if I need to go on vacation, I have to literally kill myself to go on vacation. And that's what it felt like. Maybe not quite to that extent, but every time I would go out of town, it was like you had to literally work yourself to death to take a vacation. And then when you came back, it felt like the same thing. And so there's this promise of flexibility that I really struggled with in accounting of, hey, it doesn't matter when you get your work done, just get it done. But there was so much work that you really didn't have flexibility, because what time did you have in your day, right?
yeah.
So it was like, okay, yeah, you can go home and have dinner, but just log on and finish this. And it's like, okay, well, I feel like all I'm doing is working.
Yeah. And I would rather just finish it than take a break and have to log. That was a personal take of mine, is because, yeah, you hear that all the time. And I don't know, different people have different preferences. And then, yeah, it's such a deadline driven world that it is very difficult to just say, oh no, I can put that on the back burner till after my trip or your
Yeah.
honeymoon in your example, which is way more serious. That should be treated with a little bit more respect than your average vacation.
And looking back on it, I should have vocalized that, hey, I am overworked and this is not working for me. And so I take full responsibility of that. But I think sometimes it can be hard whenever you're in a place where your manager did this, your senior manager did this, the partner did this, your senior. And so it's just like, hey, everyone does this. I should be able to do it too. And I feel like that goes both ways. The people above you are like, well, I did this, you should too. And then you're like, okay, I should be strong enough to just do this. When in reality, we all need a hard stop. We're not doing heart surgery. We're not, a lot of things aren't life and death that we're dealing with. And this idea that we should all be working ourselves to death is not something that has to be a thing anymore. We have technology. There's solutions like FloQast. And that's something I definitely want to talk about, is as we implement more technology and have better solutions, we need to not just like implement this technology and then fill our time that it saves us with being busier and busier, because that was another thing. It's like, okay, there's new technology, there's new solutions, but why are our people still not getting more of their time back? It doesn't really make sense to me.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you, so far we've been talking about the audit industry and everything, and I definitely it extends into corporate accounting as well. Like there's this notion in public audit, when you leave for private, it's going to be a piece of cake and you work, what do they do? They barely do anything. But I can tell you it is not like that. You still work good hours and you have to, grind, especially during the busy times, which is really the month end close. And when the auditors are on site, that's sort of when you're putting in the extra hours. But what's happening in corporate is they're being given more responsibility around things that are a little more operational, a little more strategic. It's not necessarily pure accounting that's there. And it's exactly to your point. Some of the work's being automated and taken off the plate, but more is being dumped from other areas of the business, which is it is interesting and exciting stuff, but there's only so many hours in a day for you to work. And then one of the challenges is that there aren't as many people majoring in accounting as there were in the past. So you have this like double whammy where actually it's a triple whammy. Fewer people are majoring. We're being asked to do more work, and then business is still expanding. I know we're in a recession right now, but that doesn't mean the economy isn't going to continue to expand, and we'll need more people to support a growing economy over the next, call it 5 or 10 years, right? So I don't know what's gonna give. And it used to be like accountants were concerned, oh, is this going to automate my job? Am I going to have a job? And now it's like, we need stuff to automate as much of this as possible, just so we can go home. That's really sort of the end of it.
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. And I think it'll be interesting to see, there's a lot of talk like, are we going to do away with the 150-hour requirement for the CPA exam? What's the value of the CPA exam? There's just a lot of things up for debate right now. And something's got to give, something has to change, or our industry is just not going to have enough people continuing to fulfill the demand for it.
I'm curious if you have any thoughts. Like, can we solve this problem on this podcast right now? What are your ideas?
I've thought about it, and I think that one of the biggest barriers is the 150 hours to the CPA. It's not like a lot of people talk about the CPA being so hard because of the exam. And yeah, the exams take time to study for, but really that extra year that you have to put in of going to school, that's extremely taxing. So it seems like there'd be a way, like if people think that exam is super important, and, I think that there's definitely some value in that exam. I'm not saying there's not. And the letters behind your name, it shows that you committed to something, that you've gone through a certain set of material. I don't feel like the 150-hour requirement makes a lot of sense personally.
I could not agree more. I mean, it makes it harder to major in it. It's expensive, as it's not just time consuming, but it's also expensive to go to school for a fifth year. And then you get student loan debt. And does a staff account, staff auditor's salary justify taking on a little bit more student loan debt to get there? I think turns into a very tricky financial situation, when accounting used to be the one where it's safe, you'll make money, don't worry about, a job after college. But now it's sort of like, I got to do this for 5 years. And doesn't make enough money to justify that. So basically, I think what we're both saying is we need to figure out a way to make it a little bit easier to get into accounting and help support more students along the way, just so you have more humans to do more of the work that's coming down the pike. Right.
Yeah. Because 4 years is already a lot to invest your time and your money in. It's like, what's the fifth year do?
Yeah. Personally, I don't think you need even a 4-year degree to be an effective like private accountant. I think in terms of there's a real need at the bookkeeper, account payable, AR clerk type level. And I just don't see why you need a CPA to do that type of work, right? And it's a good paying job that's steady and everything. And so can we just help get more people into those types of positions, which handles a lot of the, we could automate some of that. They can oversee that. And so it feels like reducing education requirements is one we both agree on. I think technology is another one that we both agree on from there. And then I don't know, how can we recruit more people into accounting? How can we get more people excited about it and interesting? Is there an opportunity there?
I think it's all about having firms change the way that they operate. And there's a lot of these smaller firms, especially, that are very on top of it. They're taking mental health seriously. They're putting in great technology solutions. They're doing things that we're talking about here to mitigate all of those challenges and make it an attractive place to be. But the universities, at least I'm speaking from my university experience, it seems like they talk about accounting as it's just Big Four. And really, there's a lot of other opportunities, but they place a huge emphasis on this Big Four opportunity when in reality, there's, like you said, there's a lot of opportunities and positions outside of just going and being an auditor. So we need to be talking about those and shining a light that, hey, there are firms that do it differently. And there's a lot of opportunities if you do go into accounting. It's not just audit, tax, or being a controller, but you have a lot of avenues. So I think it comes down to us just talking about it more and educating people, because the universities don't seem to be doing a great job of that. And again, at least from my experience.
No, that was my experience as well. I mean, Syracuse was very plugged in with, the big four firms in New York City. I think EY and PwC were kind of the tightest connection. So that was a strong feeder ground into there. And it was viewed as like it's big four or bust from there. And I remember my co-founder, Chris, is actually one of the only people who went to a regional firm instead of big four from our class. And I'm at EY. I ended up in Los Angeles. I'm just grinding and working so many hours. And EY, they don't pay overtime and everything. And so your hourly rate starts to look pretty crappy as your hours pile up over the course of the year. And meanwhile, he's getting paid overtime and his busy season's a little bit easier and he's having more fun at work and likes the people he's working with and is still learning a lot.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I also think like breaking the stigma of big four versus non big four from a recruiting afterwards perspective is important, because in some regards, you could argue it's better to go to a regional firm and get more exposure than going to a big four firm. And so there's a lot of weird reputational things that play into this as well.
Yeah. What's interesting is the firms I'm talking to now, multiple of them have specifically said recently, they don't like hiring out of big four, because the people at big four, a lot of times you get put into a very specific role that you do over and over again, and you don't have much insight into how the rest of accounting works. Like, you can't run QuickBooks. You can't do what these other firms really need you to do. And so you don't have the skill set and they have to train you. So, I mean, yeah, we're marketed to go to these big firms, but might not be doesn't sound like what a lot of the firms are actually looking for.
Yeah. And now it's like rant mode for me personally. The notion that you start an audit and tell people how to do accounting before you've ever done accounting just absolutely kills me. And I know that after I went over into private and did that for 3 years or so, I just had the thought of, man, if I went to audit after doing accounting, I would be so much more effective as an auditor. I would have been more efficient. It would have been more interesting. Maybe I wouldn't have felt as burnt out, because it was more just like, I know what the hell I'm doing. I'm not just rolling forward prior year work papers, right, replacing the tick marks, just trying to go through the motions to get this over with. Just when you're able to apply more critical thinking, anything becomes more interesting. And that might be a shift we need to consider, is instead of requirements in audit to get a CPA, maybe it's requirements in accounting to then move to audit, to then get your CPA. And it's easier to actually become an accountant. And from my perspective, like, if someone can work for 2 or 3 years and justify that they're a good employee and people enjoy working with them and they can perform and then get into audit, that's sort of the equivalent of getting 150 credit hours.
Yeah,
instead.
Exactly. Well, and while we're talking about that, I've thought about too, like, what if the universities, as part of your hours, they had like a basically an accounting firm within the university. And so rather than taking, certain classes, you're actually like preparing tax returns or doing bookkeeping, and the university can either they would have people in the cities that are their clients, or maybe you're working on some of the stuff for the college, but it's like, we need some experience, because until you're actually doing the work, just reading a textbook and having theories and concepts, it's not that helpful.
I could not agree more. That's a really interesting idea. Yeah, universities could partner with local businesses. Universities have their own accounting departments internally as well. So can we help do some of that entry level work to get a sense of it? And I also come from the angle of, it's not like you need really intense accounting experience to be better at auditing. You don't have to know how to draft a 10Q or a 10K or anything. It's just like, hey, understand what goes into reconciling a bank account. Actually do the work, struggle through it, solve the problems, and then you'll just be better positioned to go audit a bank reconciliation afterwards.
Totally. I 100% agree.
Yeah, not the craziest stuff. A couple of things need to be flipped on their head. The other one is, I think you just need to pay more, pay a little bit better. That'd be nice.
Right. Because I've heard too, a lot of people are leaving to go into like banking and so forth because they're paid a lot higher. And I mean, like you said, when you start calculating your hourly rate, it's disturbing how low it can be.
Yeah, it was Yep.
I don't recommend anyone goes and does that hasn't yet.
Don't do it. Yeah, that was the final straw for me, was when I saw how many hours I was number one in the LA office for billable hours. And when you start to divide your salary by that, you get a little concerned about what you're doing with your life there. So yeah, don't calculate that.
Well, and they encourage, I mean, whenever they put up, I don't know if you had this, but it's like they would send out an email and they'd be like, this person's, number one for billable hours and this, and this. And it's kind of like an ego boost whenever you have a high billable hour. And you're like, wait a second, is this an ego boost or is this a shot to my ego?
So it's a weird contrast, weird how that's positioned.
Yeah.
And then other than that, I mean, so we're talking like big ideas around talent and everything, but just really tactical are the things you can do for employees internally, like tomorrow, to help deal with some of the burnout and stress.
I think a big one is like actually setting boundaries and realistic timeframes. And that sounds so basic, but it's like, hey, okay, whether you're in public or private, like, let's actually look at what's on your plate, what has to get done. And then we all need to do better about communicating it. Because like my example, whenever I was sleeping 2 hours a night, I really should have put my foot down. Like that comes back on me. But on the flip side, I wish I had like a manager there kind of telling me it's okay to communicate that, because I didn't feel like I could. So I think if we can put better boundaries and be like, okay, what do we actually have? And what can wait, what can't wait, and then and actually encourage people to take a break, because whenever you're working so many hours, you become very not efficient. You make stupid mistakes. You're not a good performer. And so if we can actually tell people, hey, take the weekend off, go home at a reasonable hour, I promise you that people are going to be way more efficient over the next 8 hours than if they just worked 14 hours straight. That just doesn't promote good work habits.
The boundaries is really important. I will say, I think a lot of the workload does start at the top, and how partners sell new engagements. They can potentially overpromise timelines, and there's maybe overselling, and then that just trickles down and ends up in the lap of really the managers feel the pressure to have it be profitable. The seniors feel the pressure to get all the work done and maybe not bill as much. And then that's passed down to the staff. I will say an encouraging thing is I've chatted with some partners recently, and they are starting to turn away business because their teams have too much going on. The profitability doesn't make sense. And so I think that's an important thing, because what will happen is if we start saying no to business, the cost of audits is going to go up to make that happen. It will give us more ability to have a profitable job without having to maybe grind as many hours on each one. And that might be kind of the first step in at least not grinding as much as we have been for the last 3 to 4 years.
Yeah. Economics 101. Supply and demand is that. I think that's very true. And I think that part of just the nature of the accountant in general is like, we're high performers, we're achievers. So like a project comes in, it's like, one, I want to take it. We want to, increase our revenue. And two, it's like, oh yeah, we can get that done. Like the client wants it done by, next week. And it's usually it doesn't need done by next week. So like you said, just either saying it can be done by then or turning away work. There are a lot of solutions that I think are pretty easy to actually implement. It's just reframing what we've always done and known to be true that we quote unquote have to do, because we don't have to keep doing things the same way.
Did you have any managers who you thought were good at helping manage your stress load? I'll say I had one. I want to give her a shout out and tell a couple stories, but I'm curious if you had anyone that you did appreciate as a manager.
Yeah, it was actually a senior manager I had. He was amazing. And I know that he's partner now. And so I think whoever gets to work under him, I bet that they have a great experience. But he always left the office to go be with his children and with his wife around, I think it was like 3:30 or 4 o'clock. And he just always like encouraged everyone he was working with to like speak up, or if, they were going through something personally or professionally, even, he was their advocate. And I really, really respected him because I felt like he respected us.
Makes perfect sense. It's like the small things that go a long way, right? Just in that, I think the outside of work things, people forget about that a lot, that people have real lives outside of work, and there might be things that are affecting them in the office. And so that's nice to hear that was strongly considered. My my situation maybe wasn't quite as good. I really love my boss. The fact that she had a hard restriction around giving us our weekends back. So she wouldn't have us work on weekends. I mean, we would grind during the week. We worked, hellacious hours during the week, but she was very guarded about our weekends to at least give us 2 days to recover and do something other than think about work. And, I had friends on other teams where it was not like that. They were one engagement, for example, someone had been there 7 days a week for 18 months. And it's like, that's no way to go through life. And so if I have to work 70 hours in a week, I would much rather cram it into a 5-day time frame than space it out over 7. And that was sort of her philosophy. And then she was very good about, to your point earlier, like what deadlines actually mattered versus which ones where could you maybe miss it by a week, maybe disappoint the CFO a little bit, but whatever, we can have that conversation. And I mean, she was very good about that approach. And so I think just, understanding what's important, thinking about your people is sort of the crux of being a good manager in audit.
Yeah.
Because you're not going to be able to get to 40 hours a week for everyone. That's just not the reality of where it is today, but being more considerate, it will help.
Yeah, no, completely. And what do you think about like busy season in general? Do you think that there's a way we can maybe get it to like 50 hours a week? Do you think that's reasonable?
I mean, I think a lot of it does have to do with expectations and the job. Like the reality is for public clients and things like tax deadline, when it's a regulatory deadline, it's going to be hard to say, oh, we only have to work 40 hours this week and the deadline's going to pass. You're just always going to feel that pressure. And that's where busy season comes into play, is because you have a lot of those public company deadlines. But a lot of the smaller firms don't have public companies as clients. And so why do you need to be grinding like that all year round? It's probably unnecessary, and some of that work can be shifted around. So yeah, I think with public companies, it might be tricky. You'll just need to make sure the team is appropriately staffed. You have the right technology to audit, automate the appropriate portions of the audit where we can just get that off our plate. I know some firms are starting to outsource some of the more rote work that occurs, and that seems to be helpful as well. As long as the skill sets are good and they don't need to be overly managed, right? That seems like something that's at least a little innovative to try to help people hear more. So I think to get there is going to take time. Technology has to develop. More people have to get into accounting. I think firms probably need to stand a little bit, put their foot down a little bit more on not accepting every job. And that's starting to happen already. So a few factors will need to fall right to get there, I think, unfortunately.
Yeah, no.
What do you think?
I totally agree with you. I think one other thing that's pretty easy that people could start doing is, as a team, being careful about how they schedule meetings. I'm not sure what your experience was, but I felt like as I, got more experience working in public, at least, your days became more about not just doing work, but having meetings. And so you would get to the end of the day and you're like, wow, I still have all this work to do because I've been in meetings all day. And so I feel like that's another big thing that teams at least can do, is like, hey, we're going to schedule our meetings this time to this time, but then we're going to really respect these are working hours, so that you can get some work done. And it's not 5 p.m. and your to-do list is still just as long as it was when you walked in this morning because you've been in meetings.
That is a great idea. Yeah. Carving out, hey, 8 hour or whatever, 6 to 8 hours of the day is pure working time. Like this is where I put my headphones on and get some stuff done and don't bother me while I'm doing this. Right. So I'm reflecting on it now. And that became, it wasn't as much of a problem at the staff level. It's when I got to that kind of experienced senior level where it was like, oh my gosh, I have to be in meetings with a client. I have to meet with my team. And then I have to do audit work as well. That's like the role where it just is so hard. You're expected to do everything at the senior position.
Yeah. And balancing it all is just, difficult.
It's brutal. I always just thought of it. It's like diffusing disappointment. It's not like you can't make everyone happy. It's just like, all right, how can my team be happy enough? How can my boss not hate me? How can the client not hate me? It's like, that's a tough spot to be in. You're not going to make everyone happy in that dynamic.
Right. And I think that's like important to remember too, is like, you just got to do the best you can in the position that you're in. You can't make everyone happy or try to be a people pleaser, because then you end up disappointing everyone, including yourself. So yeah. There's a lot of learning, both learning technical, non-technical, and just personal development whenever you work in accounting.
And then what about, what about the time you do get outside of work? Are there like hobbies that are important? I know people are into meditation, and maybe working out is a good way to just blow off a little bit of steam and get some endorphins going. Anything you do outside of work to help with the stress?
Yeah, so I still ride horses a lot. That's something I've always done. And then I love just going to the gym and being pushed. So whether it's like taking a workout class, like a spin class, and having an instructor that's like really motivating you and encouraging you,
Mhm.
or like going to a weightlifting session and having a trainer who's like, no, you can lift heavier, you can add, 5 pounds, even 10 pounds this set. I love being pushed and challenged because I feel like if I have someone doing that, it's like, for me at least, it's like I don't think about work whenever someone's telling me what to do and really pushing me out of my comfort zone. So it's important for me to have that one activity that like pushes me out of my comfort zone. And then horses to me are something that's more like relaxing and meditative that I can just kind of get into la la land.
That makes a ton of sense. So find some things you enjoy outside of work that really allow you to stop thinking about work, so you can turn it off for a little bit.
Yeah, exactly.
That's smart. That's great advice for everyone on the line. I know it's tough. Like when I wasn't good about that. It's like, now that you say that, I'm like, oh my gosh, I did not do any of that. That was horrible. I'd go home and watch a couple episodes of TV and go to sleep and rinse and repeat. And that's no healthy way to go through life. I wish I thought about it a little more like you.
You know, I think that I felt like kind of the same thing though. I'd be like, okay, I got up and I'd always try to go to the gym or go ride like at literally 4 a.m. in the morning. And then I'd get to bed at night and I would still be like, wow, my day's just on repeat because I'm going to wake up in the morning and do the same thing. But I do think it's important, even if it is 4 a.m., to find time to do something that you like outside of work. Your brain needs a break. Even if it's watching TV, like you need a break, whatever that
Yeah.
break is for you.
Yeah. We are creatures of habit. I think it's finding what are the right habits in there that will make you as happy as possible while going through, tough time at work.
Yeah, definitely creatures of habit. Still am one.
For sure. Definitely. Well, hey, I've really enjoyed the conversation. I want to give you an opportunity to plug your firm a little bit more. I mean, I think our audience is going to be someone that might be interested in your services. So if you want to just, name your firm and everything and let us know more about how we can get in touch with you, I think it could be awesome.
Yeah, so if you're someone looking to increase your thought leadership and viewership online, we work with accounting firms. We work with accounting tech vendors like FloQast, ones that serve the accounting industry or help solve problems that are existing in the accounting space. Then I'd love to chat with you. I'm Katie Thomas, CPA on all social media platforms, or you can find us at leaders-online.com.
Awesome. Well, I've really enjoyed my conversation with Katie. I hope you decide you want to work with her and give her some of your marketing business, because I'm sure you're awesome and the teams enjoy working with you. Any last comments before we wrap it up here?
My final comment is just don't be afraid to stick up for yourself. If you feel overworked or burnout, communicate it, because you deserve to have a good life. Like life's supposed to be fun. It's not just so serious and all about work.
I will second that one. Awesome. Well, thank you for joining, Katie. I really appreciate you taking the time, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.
Hey, I appreciate you, Mike. This is a great conversation.
Have a good one. And thanks for listening, everybody.